An uninspiring performance for the Panthers, fall behind the eight ball, play some catch up, but once again, it's the Panthers losing another one at home.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, December 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day on the nation's #1 sports podcasting network. I'm Armando Velez, the host of the show, and here joining me on another edition of Winans Wednesday is Jacob Winans. You can follow him on X at JakeW_8. Shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL bets all season long on FanDuel. So the Florida Panthers lose to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a final score of 4-1 at home, and as now is 4 straight games at home where the Florida Panthers have lost, and now they are 0-3 in this 6-game homestand, coming out with 0 points. And the fact that the Panthers were coming into this game with 3 days off after their game on Friday and fall behind by 2 goals within the first 8 minutes. The Panthers were able to get one shorthanded thanks to Sam Reinhart in game number 800, but the Panthers weren't able to continue that momentum as a failed clear ended up in the back of their net, and it was the bottom 6 for the Toronto Maple Leafs that were able to do the damage. The Panthers were without Carter Verhaeghe as he and his wife Casey are expecting a child, but Jacob, for me in this one, it was a matter of just the Panthers' inability to get to the middle of the ice and make Joseph Woll's life difficult. And yeah, the Panthers were missing some guys, like I mentioned Verhaeghe earlier. But again, the blue line that were without the Maple Leafs were without Brandon Carlo, Chris Tanev. The fact that they weren't able to really truly get on the inside of the offensive zone, that's truly where the Panthers were really hurt themselves in a game like today.
Yeah, I thought everywhere, all over the ice, Panthers got outplayed. Not fast enough, not physical enough. Forecheck was lazy. Goaltending was poor in the first period, and they couldn't really recover from it. Bob turned it on later in the game, kept them in it for a long while, but the offense was pretty lifeless. Defense was slow to pucks, and then the power play again, total dud on the power play, and then 5-on-5 they had nothing. So yeah, it's pretty much an F- performance across the board for the Panthers tonight, and I fully understand the guys they had out of the lineup. It's been the story of the entire season. It seems like every game they're losing another player. At least tonight's was not due to injury; it was due to a pretty awesome day for the Verhaeghe family. So congrats to Carter and Casey there, and really exciting news for them. Just tough game to be without another key player, and they just didn't have the horses tonight, and doesn't seem like they're going to anytime soon. So.
No doubt. And it's another game where the Panthers go down 2 goals. Now the ESPN Plus broadcast brought up the stat of the Panthers have the second most multi-goal deficits across the NHL. The only one who has more is the Vancouver Canucks. And also the Panthers have not won a game this season when they go into a period or even the third period trailing. So the Panthers going into those intermissions with the deficit, the Panthers are just not designed to play the catch-up game in order to get a win there. But you think about all the different line combinations that the Panthers had to put. I mean, the second line was Bennett, Samoskevich, Greer, although that group was actually buzzing real well in the beginning of the game, but just didn't get their second chance opportunities. Lundell was back with Reinhart and Marchand there, but again, Noah Gregor's up on the third line. Jackson Nico was called up. He's actually a natural center who's actually playing on that line. I thought it was going to be Jack Devine who was going to be the scratch today, but it ended up obviously being Verhaeghe with what's going on off the ice for him. But you think about whenever you think of this game, you think of the Toronto Maple Leafs scored 4 goals on the night. You're thinking it's the superstars who are coming to play, the Austin Matthewses of the world, the William Nylanders, but no, it was the bottom 6 of the Toronto Maple Leafs that were able to get in on the scoring. The first one being a low to high play after a failed sweep by Evan Rodriguez, and then through a screen from Troy Stetcher, which is his first goal of the season. Now it's another game where the Florida Panthers are giving up a first goal of the season, and then it's another one where they lose the faceoff in their own offensive zone. They come up the ice. Jeff Petrie gets spun around, and then Dakota Joshua has a clear lane inside where Sergei Bobrovsky is coming out of his net a little bit, and then there's a good lane there. And it really just comes down to just the inability to win a lot of the battles as well. And to think, like I mentioned on that lost draw in the O-zone, Panthers were having issues all night, 28% in the dot for the night. Anton Lundell under par in the dot as well. Usually he's hovering around like that 50% range as well. We don't never expect it from Sam Bennett to be at a high percentage, but even Anton Lundell was a little bit disappointing in that front. The block shots, oh my goodness, it was 14 to I believe it was like 14-7 after the first period. It was 10-1. Excuse me, it was 14-7 after the second period, but it was 10-1 in block shots. The Panthers had the Corsi percentage, but they just couldn't create, especially when they were near the top of the blue line. The Leafs were especially getting up in the face of the Panthers, so that every time that the Panthers had a shot, it was trickling near the walls or outside the zone, and the Panthers had to reset. So really, that's really why the Panthers weren't able to get their aggressive forecheck going, that as we've been able to see in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, we keep harping on it, and it's just going to be the story of this season. Everything you mentioned there is personnel related.
Yeah.
Getting really completely dominated by the Leafs bottom 6 is due to the fact that the entire Panthers bottom 6 is either injured or playing in the top 6.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate reality right now. Panthers bottom 6 has always been their strength, even when their top line and second line can cancel out with another team's 1 and 2. The Panthers' depth and their third line, especially their fourth line, the fact that they in the past 2 seasons have been able to comfortably play 15 to 17 forwards that they feel comfortable with having in their lineup any given night, that doesn't exist right now. The bottom 6, honestly, in the last couple of games, the bottom 9 are just guys who would not typically be playing those type of minutes. And it's hard to match up when you go against a team like Toronto, who has pretty elite top end center depth as far as Matthews, Tavares, and then bottom 6 centers, which the Panthers really feasted on in the playoffs last year. You don't really get the opportunity to do that in a game like tonight, when the Panthers are rolling out a bottom 6 that's considerably built of normal healthy scratches and AHL players. It's hard to match up. So when you have that sort of talent gap right now in the lineup, you have to be good at the fundamentals and the little things, and the Panthers weren't tonight. Didn't block enough shots, weren't quick enough to pucks, didn't win faceoffs. Those are things that will get you killed. And then defensively, the defense, again, outside of Kulikov, is relatively healthy. It really needs to be the backbone of the team if they're going to have any chance of winning. Another poor night for the defense. We'll get into the duds, but I mean, the Forsling-Ekblad pair, Forsling had a really rough night. Jones-Mikkola, honestly, pretty invisible. Jones had a bunch of shots blocked. Mikkola was kind of all over the place positionally. And then Jeff Petrie, he's had a tough season for long stretches. Another really, really rough game for Jeff Petrie tonight, especially on the Dakota Joshua goal. The Panthers calling card is physicality, positioning, and protecting the net front. That goal was a backbreaker, and Jeff Petrie it's one-on-one, man-to-man. It's not even having to play a puck. You're just playing the guy in front of you, and ends up getting beat completely clean, out-muscled, and there was no recovering from that.
No doubt. And let's actually transition over to segment number 2, where we'll actually continue the conversation about this game, and we'll discuss our 3 duds of the game, and also the moment where when we knew the game was lost. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. And when I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, energy, mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running on full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of college and pro teams. Hydration has become a non-negotiable for me. Drip Drop helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly, just better overall. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off of your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard, and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, December 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day on the nation's #1 sports podcasting network. So it's a Florida Panthers loss, which means that we are going to discuss our 3 duds of the game and the moment where we knew the game was lost. And before we get there, for the audience, prior to recording, this is probably the least amount of conversation that Jacob and I have had before recording. Just the silence spoke volumes when Jacob joined the stream. So it just goes to show where the Panthers are at, last place in the Eastern Conference, and just a season that is kind of getting away from the Panthers, which we'll get a little bit more in segment number 3. But 3 duds of the game for me. I'm gonna go with the Jeff Petrie as my number 3 dud for the just getting flat out battled by Dakota Joshua there on the goal, which doesn't give Bobrovsky enough time to at least get to the top of his crease and freeze the puck at least, which not only happened once, but it happened twice, which leads to my second dud in the Forsling-Ekblad pairing, which failed to clear. Ekblad backs into his own crease, and then that's where Scott Laughton was able to get that third insurance goal for the Panthers there. But number 1 dud for me are the centers, and Erod especially, because two of those goals against early were with the Erod line on. And you look at that again, we look at the personnel for the Panthers. You're talking Erod, and we even talked about our doubts about his ability to drive a line. But that's when you have Sam Reinhart on your wing, and Carter Verhaeghe. But the fact that it's Jesper Boquist, who was in and out of the lineup throughout the playoffs, and then Noah Gregor, who was coming into through a PTO, that line just got flat out caved on the night. So centers, especially centers, but Erod especially is my number 1 dud on the night. How about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the centers point. I'm gonna put Erod as my number 3 dud. He's been off and on lately. It's unfortunate. He's getting bounced around between a bunch of different lines and changing line mates every night. And it almost reminds me of when Noel Acciari was with the Panthers, and they would just kind of stick him on whatever line he needed to fix. It seems like Evan Rodriguez is that role this year, and he's doing the best he can, but tough one tonight against some really good centers. So he's my number 3 dud. My number 2 is Gus Forsling. You need better from your number 1 D-man. He's the guy for the Panthers, especially defensively. A few plays he got out muscled, a few board battles he lost, struggled in puck control. And then there was one play in particular where we don't say this from Forsling often, but I felt he got lazy and ends up giving up a breakaway, which Bobette did make the save on, but was just kind of an indicator of the way things were going for Forsling. So he's my number 2 dud, and my number 1 is Jeff Petrie. poor night from that pair in general, but the play that on the Dakota Joshua goal, which ends up being the game winner, really, really inexcusable. It's bad positioning. It was a half-hearted effort to box out there on that play. You're putting your goalie in a horrible spot when you can't really afford to go down two. And I would honestly almost rather him take a penalty there. If you know you're going to get beat, just dump the guy.
Yeah.
Do something, get physical there, and protect your goalie. And I mean, I'd trust the penalty kill to get a kill there. Before I would trust Bob having to make a one-on-one save 2 feet in front of the net with almost zero reaction time available to him. So it's do anything other than what happened on that play, and is basically the gist of that. So it's Jeff Petrie number one for me.
I mean, yeah, you love how the Panthers, you would love the Panthers to go against this 5-forward power play, although they changed it after the shorthanded goal by Sam Reinhart after the misconnection on the 2-on-1. But you could argue that Anton Lundell was hooked on the play there. But hey, effort from Sam Reinhart to be first on the retrieval against 3 Leafs below the goal line, and then patience to get space. But hey, it's the second 5-forward power play that the Panthers were able to expose. They did that against the LA Kings just a few weeks ago there on their 5-forward power play, one of the 2 units. But I'm glad that none of us put Sergei Bobrovsky here, because I mean, the Gus Forsling play that you're talking about, falling behind and actually avoided tripping Bobby McMann there on a breakaway. Bob was able to make a stop, but there were so many different opportunities that Sergei Bobrovsky was positionally sound. There was a breakaway from Austin Matthews on a backhand. There was one where Nylander got a turnover off of an Adrian Greer lazy backhand out of the zone where he was on the end boards, and then just a clear lane up the slot, and Bob was able to stand still there. I'm glad that none of us put that. And listen,
and the save on Nick Waugh too, when he made that save off the one-timer,
yes,
with the
short-handed.
Short-handed, I was thinking, man, that if they come back to get in this, tie this game or win this game, that was the save that was going to do it. I outside of the first period, I thought Bob found his game.
Yeah, and I was thinking more of that chance that John Tavares had in the second period there, where he was flat on his stomach. That's kind of what I was thinking about. Okay, remember that save if the Panthers are able to come back, even though just the way they were skating didn't tell me that they were going to find a way, which leads us to the moment where we knew the game was lost. And I got to go with that Dakota Joshua goal, the second one. The fact that it was so early and the Panthers were and the fact that I had an episode the other day talking about how the Panthers are very close to like a little bit of a crisis, and the fact that they had 3 days off, and you fall behind this early. This was, and listen, we could talk all we want about the Toronto Maple Leafs and their failures in the second round and all that, but that's also another experienced playoff team on the other side as well, who's also hungry, who found themselves in last place in the Eastern Conference coming into the night, and they played the more desperate game that the Panthers did not play. Yeah, we could argue the injury conversation all we want, and it's going to be a topic all season, but they definitely showed more of that drive on the night for the Leafs. So I'm going to say when the Panthers went down 2-0. So one of the early ones where we're saying where we knew the game was lost.
Yeah, it's not often that I say that the game is lost this early in the game, but it's the Dakota Joshua goal for me too. Just given the guys on the ice tonight, the lineup the Panthers put out there, you just don't have the firepower to come back from down multiple goals early in the game against a team that's really, really good. I know their record doesn't indicate it. They've dealt with some injuries themselves. Their number one goalie is out right now long term. That's Anthony Stolarz. They've had some really tough injuries to deal with on the blue line. Austin Matthews has been in and out of the lineup, some with injury, and they're finding their identity without Mitch Marner. All of that is to say that is still a very, very talented team that just hasn't quite figured out their identity yet. And you can't take them lightly. I felt the Panthers did. They got burned for it, but that Dakota Joshua goal, you're not really giving yourself a chance to come back. And the Leafs in particular, they're going to be a tough matchup for the Panthers this season because so much of why the Panthers tend to dominate that team is the center depth and balance that the Panthers have when Barkov is in the lineup. The Leafs center depth is able to match up and usually beat most teams down the middle in the NHL. And the Panthers typically are not one of them because the Panthers usually have the advantage when it comes to the bottom six centers. Right now they don't because of that injury. Yeah, tough matchup, tough goal to give up, and there was no coming back afterwards.
Yeah, it's just been a whole trickle down effect ever since the beginning of training camp for the Panthers. By the way, without looking at the lineup and the line rushes from tonight, how many forwards do you think we're playing in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final in tonight's game?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Let me try to count it out really quick. So we got Bennett, Rodriguez, Lundell, Marchand. So that's 4. Greer, 5. That may be it.
That was it.
Yeah, that's got to be it.
5 forwards from that unit from tonight's game that played in the Stanley Cup Final. Just to give you guys a little bit of perspective on what the Panthers are dealing with on a night like tonight. And listen, the Panthers had to do things a little bit differently on their power play. Jeff Petrie hasn't seen power play 2 time in a while, and he was on that unit. The Panthers only had 1 power play. We could complain about the officiating all we want, about the holding of the stick, the high stick on Jack Devine in this game, but either way, I didn't feel like even if there was an equal penalty discrepancy that the Panthers were going to find a way to get it. But funny enough, the one penalty they did get, maybe that was a makeup call from because I don't think that Dakota Joshua actually interfered Mackie Samoskevich there as he tried that swim dodge there when they were dumping the puck in. But yeah, so just a rough night for this Panthers team. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, and we're going to discuss whether where our headspace is at, where some of the fans' headspace is at, and we got as far as being last place in the Eastern Conference. We also have some injury updates to a few players. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place live bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, December 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day on the nation's #1 sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Armando Velez here with Jacob Winans on another Winans Wednesday. And we have some injury updates. One of them we already knew as far as Matthew Tkachuk and his projected return. Emily Kaplan did say that he is expected to be back maybe late December, but the other one that we didn't know, is Eetu Luostarinen. Apparently, he has not healed from the burns from the barbecue accident enough to put hockey gear on, and the expectation is at the end of December as well. So it's not going to get any easier for the Panthers. Lots of back-to-backs, including one this weekend for the team. There's going to be one on the road trip as well. So the Panthers are going to get all these games bunched up, and they're not going to have a whole bunch of their guys. And Jacob, I just want to read a few quotes from the head coach, the boss, Paul Maurice, and he has in this one. I just wanted to type this out and just say and read what he had to say, and saying, quote, "You have to find new ways to grind. We don't have the margin for error. We know the situation we're in, close quote. And he also spoke about how he loves that the team is looking up at the standings because it keeps kind of the sense of urgency right there for the team. And they know that they can't mess anything up right from here on out. And to think that we are having this conversation 25 games in, and we spoke about all the, if anyone can withstand this situation, it's the Panthers. But at the same time, there's only so much you could fall behind in a season. And listen, this time last week, we were talking about how the American Thanksgiving point might be an outlier this year. But since our podcast last week, Panthers lost 2 more, and they find themselves 6 points out. It was obviously a lot closer last week, but just like how one winning streak can go in one direction, a losing streak like this one that the Panthers are on, four straight home losses as well. Let's point that out as well. This is one that is going to be a really, truly tough hill to climb.
Yeah, and we discussed it last week, how you win 3 games in a row, you're all of a sudden near the top of the conference, or you lose 3 and you're at the bottom. When we discussed that, I didn't expect the Panthers to immediately go lose 4 or 3 more, but it's it's not good, especially given that this is their longest really stretch of home games that they're going to have this year. These are not points you can afford not to bank, and I don't know that they can make it out of this, to be completely honest. And there's no shame in that either. Given what they're dealing with, I think all teams would be in the same situation they're in right now. Matthew Tkachuk coming back should help. Etu coming back should help. That's assuming no other injuries before they get back, which unfortunately it doesn't seem to be the case for the Panthers this year. They're losing somebody every night. How many times have we ever lost a guy to a barbecue accident? I mean, I don't want to make.
There's another one that happened in St. Louis. Just
another one.
Toropchenko.
I mean, I don't want to make light of the injury. It's just a crazy year right now especially for the Panthers. The luck has been completely against them. I don't know that they're going to have what they need to have to make it out of it. I will say there's some good to what Paul Maurice said about no margin for error. They know the situation they're in. They like being at the bottom of the standings. I don't doubt that. I do believe that the Panthers team performs best as an underdog. I do believe that they take some sort of weird, sick joy in proving everybody wrong and pissing people off, and they have an opportunity to do that. It's a little bit reminiscent of the 2023 team that was really, really ugly to start the year, and then got hot at the right time and makes a Stanley Cup run. Difference is they had their full healthy roster that year, except obviously a bunch of guys banged up in the playoffs, but playing through it. They had all their horses on that team. They just didn't have cap space to get reinforcements. This is a little different. They don't have the star players. They don't have the big money guys who carry the team. It's a lot of new faces, a lot of unfamiliar faces, a lot of guys who haven't necessarily scored a lot of points in the NHL or haven't played a ton of games or proven themselves in playoff and Stanley Cup moments. It's going to be a very, very, very difficult uphill climb. I don't want to say the season's over. It seems premature to say that.
Yep, I'm with you there. I can agree on that.
But I will say I'm not holding my breath. It's honestly, in my opinion, the rest of the season, it's a complete toss up, and I think I'm at peace with whatever happens the rest of the way this year, because if this ends up being a lost season due to injury, it's a team that just won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and it's a team that has their core in place for the next several years. I'm not going to lose too much sleep over an injury-riddled season where they just can't battle themselves out of a hole that's just too big. And that's kind of how I feel. It's not waving the white flag, but it's waving the I'm okay with whatever happens.
You're waving the acceptance flag.
Yeah.
In a way. By the way, this point through 25 games in 2023, they were 15-8-2, so a 3-game difference, and they were already falling behind then. So, yeah, 12-12-1, where the Panthers are at right now. And the thing is, a few people have suggested in a tweet that I point out about Panthers fans sound off. Where are you at on the panic meter? Is like, oh, Kachuk and Luosterainen won't return until December. The Panthers should make a move. And I don't know if that's the right decision to make right now when about giving up assets when you're this far behind and then risking some futures for possibly something that might not happen and them making the playoffs as well, because that's not a guarantee for this team right now. Honestly, my mindset is that some type of January 2016 run for the Florida Panthers is going to have to happen in order to make it, because even a 3-game winning streak right now for the Panthers, you have to depend on other teams to lose. You got to rely on overtime. You got to rely that those games don't end up past regulation. I mean, we're like 40 games away from scoreboard watching, looking at specific teams there. But at the same time, I think it needs to be figured out for the guys in the room.
I agree. I think even before they got in this position, I've been of the mindset that trading futures for a Band-Aid fix to a team that may have too many injuries for a Band-Aid to cover them all. I don't love that as a strategy, especially when the Panthers have given up so many futures and assets to compete, and those have been home runs. You've gotten 2 Stanley Cups out of it. I think the Panthers now are in a position where you don't give up any more future assets that you have very limited resources on for anything other than this is a year I know I can win the Stanley Cup. This season is very quickly beginning to look like I don't know that this is a team that can win the Stanley Cup this year. And that is perfectly fine given the circumstances that they've been dealt. I don't think it would be smart, and I think it would be short-sighted to try to falsely manufacture some sort of pseudo contender that's not really a contender to try to squeak into the playoffs. And now you're putting pressure on Barkov to try to rush back from injury, and I don't know. And even if they do manage to get into a playoff position, let's say sometime in March, they're right there on the bubble, or even around the trade deadline time. You also have to consider the fact that so many of these guys are out long term. They will be just getting back into the lineup around playoff time, assuming the Panthers are even in a position to contend for the playoffs. There's no guarantee that things fall right back into place with timing, with chemistry, with knocking the rust off. I mean, there's so much at play here where this season has quickly become so much of an unknown that I wouldn't trade futures for anything but a sure thing. And right now you're not within striking distance or within the even the eye test of thinking that this could be a surefire contender. So my opinion is you stand pat, you let this play out how it plays out. And right now there's some young guys in the lineup getting some valuable experience, and that will help them in the future. But I don't think you make any short-sighted moves here.
And let's not forget this fact. The Panthers are over the cap as far as total cap.
Yeah.
So if they were to make this short-sighted move to bring someone in, and if Barkov is healthy enough to play in the postseason, you're going to have to do so much roster maneuvering with the new rules. The fact that you just can't the fact that there is going to be a roster game day cap for those teams now starting this season in the playoffs. So that's also a reason why you just don't panic in trying to make a move.
I agree. It almost creates more problems than it's worth. And there's not a single guy you could trade for right now, given what the Panthers have in their prospect pool and with their draft picks, there's not a single guy on the market that's going to turn this thing around just by bringing in one guy. It wouldn't make sense to me. I think it almost creates more problems than it's worth. And it's a tricky situation, but I do find it a little bit funny that we've got a team that's 12-12-1 with like 70% of their lineup out. There's been times in Panthers history where 500 was considered a solid start to the season. And we're 12-12-1 talking about, are we panicking? Is it a lost cause? I mean, let's settle down, everybody. We're coming off back-to-back Stanley Cups. Got some guys out of the lineup. There's no panic here. It's even if they don't make the playoffs this season, doesn't mean this is all of a sudden over and it's time to blow it up and the run is done. And I mean, it's a rough year, a lot of guys out, and there will be a bounce back, whether it's this season or next.
Our friend Florida Panthers historian Francisco Porta replied to my tweet saying, maybe the Panthers have a little bit of Golden State Warriors in them. Let's not forget during 2021 they won 15 games, last place in the entire NBA after winning a few titles, and then they come back and then eventually win. So hey, maybe it is really, truly the time to say gap year for the Florida Panthers. But you know what? There's still games to be played, and you know what? We have the right to change our mind here on the podcast and what we say online as well. So because our thoughts on this are also dictated on the results of the games, and those are ultimately what matter. But before we get out of here, some Winter Classic news is the road to the Winter Classic. They have started doing their recording. Their production crew is with the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers. The first episode will be aired on December 10th at 6:30 on TNT, and the rink will officially arrive at Lone Depot Park on December 17th. So definitely an exciting time, and still something to look forward to for this Florida Panthers team. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on another edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Another successful show recording, although is not a successful result for the team. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yep. You can follow me on X at JakeW_8.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day on the nation's #1 sports podcasting network. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.